look at each other.
Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Carmen Rios, the digital editor at Ms., and I'm here today with Karen Karbo. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
And Karen is the author of, oh, you match too.
That's right.
Yes,
this is my Handmaid's Tale red theme here.
Yes, the author of In Praise of Difficult Women, Life Lessons from 29 Heroines Who Dared to Break the Rules. And I'm sure many of you have seen, we are currently running a special where new Ms. members get a copy of the book because we love it that much. And so, yeah, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about difficult women.
Yep. And how we could be difficult?
Yes. And I'm really curious as to sort of like what brought you to the book. How did you get, I know you've written biographies of many women.
Yes.
So what brought you to this particular sort of interest in difficult women?
Well, there's sort of like the long story, which is I have always been a fan of biographies of women. When I was a little girl, right? Jane Goodall, my parents had a subscription to National Geographic, and even before I could read, I would page through and there would be Jane with the chimps. And so I was always sort of a fan of women who had kind of done these amazing things and had amazing lives. So it's always sort of been a part of my life. But what I had sort of been hoping for with this book is that I began writing it in 2014, 2015. And I was going to create this kind of history of 20th century icons who had sort of led us to this moment, right? We had had an African-American president. Now we're going to have the first woman president. And I wanted to really celebrate these women, our historic women and our forebears, and also to show that women have been doing this forever. Women have been pushing back forever. You know, we're all the daughters of the time in which we were born and raised, but women have always been, quote unquote, difficult. Then, of course, the election happened and the world spun around, until my original project, which was going to be sort of celebrating
this moment in time.
Right, was like, and I kept writing, but the sense sort of was like, this is not, somehow now this isn't relevant. Like the fight, if anything, the fight now has been revealed. Like we really now see what's been under, this country and what the, so I reconfigured it. And I thought, who are my, my heroes historically, and who do I admire now? Who is speaking out now? Who is being a difficult woman now? And who can we learn from now? Because clearly there is still work to be done.
Yes, and I really like that, every woman in the book sort of embodies this different characteristic of a difficult woman, right? Like some difficult women are activists like Gloria Steinem, some difficult women are taking over media like Shonda Rhimes and, taking up as much space as they want to.
Right.
And I like that it sort of also provides that blueprint for people of maybe how to be more difficult. Right. And so I'm wondering, when did you realize you were a difficult woman?
Well, it's interesting. I like to think that I'm actually not that difficult, but I was called a difficult woman in kindergarten. It was the first time I had heard that. And even though I had no idea what it meant, it stuck with me. In kindergarten, how you go from painting and now it's story time and now it's nap, like you move through your day. And this happened to be about painting, and I was working on my painting. And Mrs. Warnack, and if you're out there, Mrs. Warnack, I have your number. Mrs. Warnack wanted us to move on, and I pitched a full-on temper tantrum because I wanted to finish my painting. Parents were called in, sat down, and said, it was time to move on, and she insists on being difficult. And I thought, no, I wanted to finish my painting. And my parents were like, oh, okay, we'll talk to her and we'll see and stuff. And it just felt like, again, it sat with me for many, many years, and I never really knew what it meant. But it was, I just wanted to do this thing, and I got labeled something that didn't seem to have anything to do with really the issue.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I was called, insist on being difficult. And that's the other thing, like that phrasing is like I'm willfully trying to piss off my teacher instead of just I wanted to finish what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that seems seminal, the accusations that women get. It's like I have my mission, I have my passion, I have my goals. This is the kind of thing I want to do. And if I don't, let other people pass before me or put other people's needs first, or make sure everyone around me is happy, then I might be difficult.
Yeah, well, and that's really funny because that sounds a lot like the nevertheless she persisted moment.
Right.
That and Elizabeth Warren is in this book as one of the difficult women. And I'm sort of, how did you decide on just these 29 other difficult women?
Well, I mean, it was a long process, and there's probably about 100 rosters out there of different configurations, right? So the first thing I wanted to do was write about women that really spoke to me, and either they excited me intellectually or they excited my heart. Because any kind of writing or any kind of art, it really has to excite something inside the creator, or else it tends to be flat, So that was always my lodestone, is like, do these women inspire me?
Yeah.
Do I admire them? And then I also really wanted to work to be as diverse as possible. I wanted women from different ethnicities and different sexual orientations and different countries, and women who came from wealthy families and women who came from, families in need, like all across the board. So that was another component. And then I wanted, as you said, to portray women of all different personality types, because we are also not just, women with our vaginas. Like there are extroverts, there are introverts, there are actors, there are talkers, and so after all that shook out, these are who I arrived at. And also it was funny, the other night I was at a book reading, and one of the gentlemen in the audience, and I always am glad when the dudes show up, because it takes a lot of courage, I think, in this time. But he said, I think this book has a liberal bias. And I said, I think you're right. I said, as a lifelong Democrat, of course it does. And I told you, because there's other women. And I said, who I love? Betty Ford. She's not in the book. But yes, there are women from the other side of the aisle that are difficult and admirable. And what I didn't say, because as I said, Carmen, I'm not that difficult. I didn't say, you know what, go write your own book. Go write your own difficult woman book about all your conservative ladies.
Well, and I mean, so many of the people in here are sort of not necessarily apolitical, like maybe not absent from politics, but they're not politicians. They're not lawmakers, which I think is something that makes this book so fun, is it unites, someone like Gloria Steinem with Hillary Clinton, but then also with Billie Jean King and Amy Poehler, and just sort of this cosmic spread of all different kinds of women who are difficult in different fields,
correct,
as well as in different ways. So, I actually wrote a column for a long time called Idol Worship at Autostraddle. And it was just me being like, these are women I like and who inspire me. And I was so pleased to find so many of them in here too. So maybe it's because we're both difficult.
I think so.
I do think it's a spread of, I was like, yes, I do love all of these women, and I'm learning more about them, and I enjoy that too.
Well, and I think, the thing is that it's so, Me Too and Time's Up, and that's awesome. And it's awesome to have women in positions of power who are visible, talking about this. It's great to have a manifesto. It's great to have a call to action. But we all have to get up in the morning, and we all have to put one foot in front of the other. And how do we, we are only difficult in the moment in time. And so, what I'm hoping with this book is that, you can read through it and think, I'm not going to be leading the parade. I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be in front of 100,000 people giving the speech, but I can do this. This is something I can do. I can follow my passion and not let anyone deter me, like Jane Goodall and Amelia Earhart did. So I just think that that there are ways that all of us, through story, because we learn a lot, and that's why we were attracted to these women, because we looked at their lives and thought, this is so cool, I want a life like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the foreword by Cheryl Strayed, and I loved this, she sort of defines a difficult woman as a woman who thinks she can do whatever she wants to do, the way that, her father says it with such disdain for this neighbor of hers, Myrtle. And then in your introduction, you call a difficult woman a woman who insists on inhabiting the full range of her humanity. Right. And I think you're right that in this moment in time, that's so pivotal and important. And there are so many difficult women to learn from, especially the 29 women in this book. How do you think we can be more difficult?
Well, I think it's amazing because I think actually if we are able to sort of just up our game on like an inch, if all women do it, that we will raise all boats. And it's things like, this is a terrible habit I used to have. And since I've been working on this book, I've been trying not to do it, is say, what do I know? Like I'm going to offer an opinion about something. And I say, what do I know about Tesla cars? I think, I read the paper and I know as much as the people I'm talking to. Like, why am I automatically discrediting what I'm about to say? Yeah. And it was just a habit. So I'm trying to be careful about that, and also speaking up. I was doing this difficult deed of the day, and that is, I think, difficult deed of the day. I think is a great thing to do. But I had a little scary moment on public transportation, which maybe for novices is not the perfect place to launch your difficult deed of the day. Yeah. But there was a woman, and this was sort of right after Me Too broke and everything, and the train wasn't very crowded, and my phone was dead. And I think if my phone had not been dead, this all would not have happened. But so I was sitting there, and there was a guy across from me on his phone, and a young woman got on, and she walked past, and he said, "Nice ass," just like throwing it out there. And I said, "I don't think that was necessary." And he looked at me and he said, "Fuck you." And I was like, that really wasn't necessary. And, I felt in my head, it felt so badass, but it was like a chiding mother. I was like, now that really wasn't necessary. But here's the thing that happened. I thought, oh my God, he's going to like beat me up. But really, he went like this and went back to his phone. And I thought, this is what men do. Men kind of throw it out there. If they don't get a good response, they just go back to their business. And I think women, we tend to be upset about, we tend to worry about upsetting people. We tend to worry that if we sort of throw something inappropriate out there that we're going to be punished, that we're going to immediately, the bolt from heaven is going to come down and crack us on the head for being outspoken, that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, you were telling me a story before we went live about, a time in college when you were going to be on national TV and they wanted you to talk to a guy that, you weren't going to debate him. And you said, I am not doing it.
Yeah.
And they worked around you.
Yeah. And it really does blow my mind because it's not necessarily something that I would see myself being so certain about now. Like I had never had an opportunity like that. And yet I was still like, that's not what I'm going to go there to do. Like if you're going to have me debate this particular thing with this particular person, that's not something I'm interested in. And they reassured me. They followed through on that. And it's interesting because I feel like my 2018 thing was also like that imposter syndrome has to go away.
Oh, exactly.
And it's so, I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking about this the other day too, this idea of there are women in this book, women like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this was always something that struck me about Hillary Clinton and women like Hillary Clinton is we now have these possibility models, women my age and the generation that is coming up now are women and girls who grew up seeing women like Hillary Clinton or whose mothers had this feminist ideology. And it really does boggle the mind to imagine Ruth Bader Ginsburg just sort of being like, I'm here, the ACLU needs to do this. Also now I'm going to go, argue these cases for gender equality. And there was no possibility model there. And it's like, oh, well, then maybe where was the imposter syndrome then? You know what I mean? Like this idea that there was never a moment of, am I qualified? Because there was no reason to believe that they were. Well, but they just were like, this is what I want. I deserve it. That's what's fair. I'm going to take it.
And you also look at, the atmosphere in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg went to law school. She was like one of 9 women of a class of 500. And they still came down on her and said, you're taking the position of a man. Like a man could be in here. There's don't make me do the math, like 493 men. And yet, they were quite clear when she got out and she was going to teach law at Rutgers. They said, we're just not paying you as much because you're not supporting a family. And she still, so she didn't even have that. Like she had her own sense of her mission and her intelligence and her drive. Yeah. And by the way, she also had a family and children. She had it all before that was even a thing.
Yeah.
Because that's just what she wanted. And I don't think she listened to anybody.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like a lot of the women in this book, I think they never really stopped to second guess themselves. They never actually gave themselves that moment to be like, should I be here?
Right.
Or, do men deserve these spots? Instead, it was like, well, this is where I want to be. So it's too bad for those
Right.
like 9 other guys.
Exactly.
Which is also, I think, amazing because I love that Ruth Bader Ginsburg always says we need 9 women on the court.
Exactly. Yeah,
Not all 9.
She just goes there.
And is it true? I heard that she was a fan of the book.
Yes, I got a lovely letter. Yes, and she, I mean, bless. Oh my God, I love her. But yeah, she said she was honored to be, with such an esteemed group of women, and of course, she's a rock star, and it was very sweet, and I appreciated it a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so what did you learn sort of, these are women who, they already inspired you and you were obviously already aware of the stuff they had done, but was there, what was it like actually writing the book? How do you feel it changed you in a way that maybe you hope it's also going to change your readers?
Right. Well, a couple things. The first is that most of the women in the book seem to be okay with having people around them disapprove of them. Even people they loved, they would think, you will adjust. It didn't seem, and like I said, they made mistakes. They had bad days. They got depressed. They had the full. It's not that they were difficult and that made everything good. Because by the way, people don't necessarily say, "Oh, hey, you're being difficult. Oh, I want to change that." That's a good thing. Thank you for being difficult and forcing me to rethink my position. People don't, but they didn't care so much. So I sort of started thinking, if someone's upset with me, time will pass and maybe we'll talk about it, but the heat will come out of the emotion. They will adjust, they won't adjust. Things are fluid. And I think, women, we're people pleasers. And I think the culture has kind of, whether or not it was intentional, was kind of created to keep us in our place because they know we care. So they care a little less. And, the other thing is they really believe that what they wanted to do was at least as important as what everybody around them wanted to do. And it was interesting. I think that's perhaps the first line of the introduction.
Yeah.
And a reviewer noted, that's a pretty low bar. And I said, yes, thank you for making my point for me. It doesn't take much to be called a difficult woman.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you ask for the tiniest little shred of fairness or dignity, and suddenly it's like, whoa, this is this is a lot for us.
Right.
We can't handle.
Stay in your lane, ladies.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always love the criticisms of feminism or sort of modern women that sometimes come from our opponents are always sort of like, and if they had it their way, we would live in, and then they sort of always inadvertently just describe a utopia. They're like, if they had it their way, we'd live in a world where men and women found fulfillment in their careers and every all of a sudden everyone would be going to school and everyone would be, and I'm just like, yeah, that's
right.
exactly
Who
what
would
we
make
want.
my bologna sandwich though?
Yeah, exactly.
I would have to make my own bologna sandwich.
And I think that's maybe even what's even more remarkable about it is, and you do say that in the introduction, this idea that the women in this book are obviously amazing, but then you sort of think to yourself, oh, but really it's what made them amazing is something that should be unremarkable.
Right.
It's it is super remarkable that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is who she is, that Hillary Clinton is who she is, that women like Coco Chanel and, Shonda Rhimes are who they are. But then when you think about it, you're like, but men have been doing it that way for so long.
Exactly.
Men have been dominating late night TV for so long.
Right.
They've been making shows that talk about their own experiences for so long. They've been just running for office because they want to, or getting into political life and public life because they know they're smart enough to be there for so long. And no one has ever been
exactly.
Wow, that's weird. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So,
and the other thing is that, because I know feminists get the rap, they hate men. They hate men, which, not true. I've been a feminist my whole life. I adore men. But also a lot of the women in the book have had very successful intimate relationships, whether with men or women, but they've had great marriages, they've had partners, they've had helpmates, and there's a lot of successful relationships in the book. So it's not like they're all like lonely and difficult, but they get their way. They have families, they have intimates. Even if you look at someone like Frida Kahlo that like had this notoriously tempestuous relationship with Diego Rivera, they were devoted to each other and they were passionate, and they were both a little kooky about the whole thing, but she had connection with this man she loved. Yeah. So it isn't as if this sort of wanting fairness is going to preclude you from intimacy. And I think that's the other thing they always want to slap us with, is say like, well, you'll be right, but you'll be alone. But that's not true.
Yeah, it's more like you'll be happy when you're alone, or you'll find someone who's on your level.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much we're running out of time.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much. And just so everyone, one more time, it's beautiful red book. I feel like I should have worn red.
You should have worn this. There's a beautiful kind of raspberry that you could have worn.
That's true. We could have made up the entire color spectrum.
That's right.
Yeah. But In Praise of Difficult Women, it's an amazing book and a really fun read. I was traveling yesterday and reading it sort of in a lift, on a plane.
Oh, awesome.
And it's such a, I love little books and essays for that reason too. Because you're just like, one down, another one to go. But yeah, you'll learn a lot. You'll be inspired. And there's a link in the description of this live video. So if you want a copy and you want to read Ms., which, might I say, many difficult women writing for Ms. right now. And hopefully many difficult women reading it. So definitely grab a year of Ms., grab a copy of the book, and thank you so much for being
Carmen.
Here with us today.
Thank you, Facebook.
Yeah,
even though we're sort of mad at Facebook.
That's true. But yeah, if you're still there, if you haven't boycotted yet, thank you for watching.